youths and viewers, my name is Kiss and welcome back to KTP Network. I'm reacting to Platinum Games Switch 2 edition of Bayonetta 3 as a top priority. I agree. Bayonetta 3 comes off as a next-gen game, so we do need, like, a remaster of some kind or a porting of something somehow. So let's see what this man has to say. Jonto Johnny. Is that how you spell it? Jodo Johnny. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm butchering your name, dude.
Alright, it is 2025, and even after 3 years, one thing is still for sure. Nobody who played Bayonetta 3 is still quite over it. It's such an enigma of a game experience. 1 second, the developers are showing that they understand how to craft a satisfying game, and then the next, it's like they purposely sabotage themselves. The highs of Bayonetta 3 are above and
Yeah, I heard it's because they didn't have the closer, the closing developer available, so to balance out the game itself. So that's why they sabotaged it in a way, is that he wasn't involved. But it was still pretty solid.
beyond
Not as great as the first two, but solid.
the sky and even space itself, yet the lows are deeper than the bowels of hell. How does one game have some of the most sublime combat in any game ever, yet feel so unpolished? How does it have the greatest spectacle from a game in the last decade, yet have the worst graphics in the series? How does it have an insanely awesome premise, but fall so
Really? Whoa.
flat with what might be the... How does
Damn,
its
worst
decade
graphics.
yet have the worst graphics in the series?
Dead.
How does it have an insanely awesome premise, but fall so flat with what might be the most unsatisfying ending in gaming history? The decisions made in
I mean, if we're being completely transparent here, I mean, that was a racist ending. That was little girl. That was the little girl from the first game, you know? So if she has to die for the other two to come back, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it because this one wasn't saucy enough. She wasn't sensual enough for me. She wasn't sassy enough for me. The voice actress did great. I liked her, but she just wasn't the first or second Bayonetta for me.
Bayonetta 3 were baffling, to say the least, and because of that, it's so crazy to think that I still love and
And I love me a sassy bitch. Excuse me for cursing. So
adore this game. Many of us do. And I think it's because we all see what it could be. It's so close to being one of the best games ever made. We taste it every time we boot the game up and fight with its awesome combat mechanics. The visual flair, the feeling of possessing overwhelming power, the satisfying chants emitting from Bayonetta's mouth. Bayonetta 3 sells that Bayonetta
Damn, the fifth element scene. That was great. That was great.
doesn't do boss fights. She is the boss fight. And it does
That's
so
true.
better than either of its predecessors, in my opinion. So why then? How does it feel so incomplete?
This was
well,
your graphics for
quite simply,
Bayonetta
it feels
3,
like
damn.
there's a lot missing from the experience that is hinted to
played it
having
off
been
a
there at
friend's
some point.
emulator.
We know in retrospect that
It was
Bayonetta
great.
3 went through problems during development. We know that it had its development almost entirely scrapped halfway through and restarted. We know that issues arose with the original voice actress, and we know that Platinum Games had its own internal struggles going on and were losing core members left and right. But Bayonetta 3 deserves better. The state it was in on release is impressive given everything that's happened, yet now that the dust has settled, I think now would be a great time for Platinum Games to evolve it into what it deserved to be.
That was such
It
a
actually
great
feels
fight.
necessary that they do this before making Bayonetta 4. Matter of fact,
And does anybody think that Bayonetta and Bayonetta 3 looked a lot like Uma Thurman?
it's the only practical path forward that they have to rebuild trust and excitement from the series from their fan base. With the Switch 2 having been recently announced and its capabilities revealed for the general public, it's hard not to remember the one Nintendo exclusive game that screamed for better hardware and a general redo in many aspects. Yeah, that's Bayonetta 3. Let's start with the obvious. Bayonetta 3 needs to be remastered for better hardware. If we were to have a Switch 2 edition, we could clean up the ugly, mushy textures that plague the environments. We could also fix the lighting and allow Bayonetta...
But wouldn't playing Bayonetta 3 from Nintendo Switch from the first cartridge kind of remaster it on its own with the second device. Am I missing something? Like, wouldn't that, since you're playing it on a higher caliber device, wouldn't you be able to see what it was meant for? Maybe something's not clicking up here. Let me know.
Herself to have more of a presence during the on-screen havoc. Cutscenes on Switch 2 could also give her more presence on screen, with the depth of field effect and the use of lighting, similarly to what Bayonetta 1 and 2 did. Currently, she just kind of blends in with everything on screen and is constantly shadowed underneath
My gameplay
it.
looked like that.
We could use the highest poly models for characters at all times, rather than how the Switch 1 constantly had to replace them with lower poly LODs, even when up close to the camera. This was especially prevalent in the Tokyo segments, and pretty much everywhere when playing in handheld. I'd even take this a step further and say Platinum Games shouldn't just give us higher poly models for the characters, but they should fix and replace their faces and expressions entirely. Currently, many fans don't feel that Bayonetta looks like herself at all in 3. Not only that, but her expressions look far more lifeless and uncanny than they did in 1 and 2. It's odd that previous games managed to give her more natural movements to all her facial rigs, particularly her mouth, eyes, and eyebrows. And yeah, like I said before, I think a complete overhaul to Bayonetta's face card in 3 is absolutely needed. The changes should look as drastic as the Tomb Raider reboot, from its PS3 version to its definitive edition on PS4. Like, look at how much different and better Lara Croft looks. Bayonetta's face should have a similar evolution to the Switch 2 edition. Thule canon should be remade entirely. For those who don't know,
I know there's an anniversary situation going on for Bayonetta, I think. So, will they do it?
No, every Thule area we traverse in Bayo 3 is the only holdover from when the game was being crafted as an open world title. You'll notice it's actually far lesser in quality as such, so I'd love to think that Platinum Games hasn't just been biting their nails the last couple of years, but have been working on completely remaking this area for a remaster, because this is like Pokemon levels of bad. It straight up looks like a GameCube environment on a Switch game. That's not a comparison you want for your game. The frame rate can also actually be made not only steady, but even higher than ever with Switch 2's 120 FPS capabilities. Bayonetta 3's combat is amazing, but one hiccup we all faced with it was constant frame rate drops, which admittedly changed timing for movements and enemy attacks just enough to where we the player would get hit unfairly at times. I also urge Platinum Games to rebalance the game to where enemies don't attack from off screen. Bayo 3 was the first and only game in the series to allow this, but I think that making the enemies more aggressive and durable will be a far more satisfying experience for players if they got rid of the fact that they can hit you off screen. Now, these are just many of the ways that the performance and visuals for Bayonetta 3 can be improved. These are huge aspects to be fixed for sure, but I also think Bayonetta 3 would benefit from additional content and even additional context. For additional content, I very much believe we should have more costumes added for Bayonetta. I figured this was a given, but she should at the very least...
Didn't she get the outfits from the people that she tried to help? Because I was wearing that Egyptian outfit all day, so... How many more outfits could we get? I would argue that Bayonetta 3 had the most outfits, the most the ones that you could change interchangeably. They had a lot. So
have 2B and Astral Chain outfits added.
There.
Many fans also want her outfit from the prologue cutscenes to be playable, so there's that too. Platinum Games should allow all of her hair suits to have their stripped versions during Demon Slave. Bayonetta 2 and even Smash Bros. Allowed both of her outfits from 1 and 2 to peel off when she summons demons and portals. So why doesn't Bayonetta 3? It's just common sense if you ask me to have this
the woke crowd. They were catering to a certain crowd, I believe. It was around that time where the pendulum was swinging towards that crowd. And so, in order to not sexualize as, not to be deemed as a sexual character, they did that to appease. But you're never going to appease people. Like, that's why I never try to appease anyone. Like, you mess with me, you mess with me. You don't. It is what it is.
Added in. The game also needs more dialogue added and possibly a complete rework to Bayonetta's voice lines that we already have. Let's talk about that second part first. Jennifer Hale didn't always do a great job of having Bayonetta sound like Bayonetta. Not only was her voice too high-pitched a lot of the times, but she also spoke with the same fluctuations and cadence to her voice lines, even the ones that
It'll take time. It'll take time. She's gonna get it.
preceded and succeeded each other. It was very jarring to hear back while playing the game. So not only do I think she should redo her lines to have more variety and fluctuations, but I also think she should keep her deeper voice on lock for any time Arc Eve Origin Bayonetta is on screen, aka the Bayonetta we played through for most of Bayonetta 3.
That's true. It's gonna take a lot of practicing on her part, especially since we don't have Helena anymore, since the whole debacle that they wanted Jennifer Hale first and they wanted her as a cameo and she had to lie about it. You just cost us some great talent, Helena. That's really, really sad. So here's hoping Jennifer can fill those shoes and practice as Bayonetta a bit more.
I may sound like I'm being critical of Hale here, but it's only because she showed the ability to mimic Bayonetta well whenever she voiced
Right
the
there.
Bayonetta 1 and 2 variants.
Yeah, she did.
So it baffles me how much she let go of that effort when voicing our Bayonetta that we play as in 3. Okay, so
She
now
probably
I want
wanted
to
to
bring
bring
us
a
back to
different
the
take.
concept of additional dialogue. One of the biggest reasons Bayo 3 didn't make sense is because of the lack of speaking lines. Platinum Games has a habit in this series to not explain their concepts of their world during the campaign itself, but rather disperse it to us through text logs that we can collect. In 1 and 2, this was tolerable, even if they could have put a bit more explanation in their cutscenes. However, in 3, this is just egregious. One reason why is the text logs in 3 don't even explain nearly as much as they should. Plain and simple. These should also have pages added in the Switch 2 edition. However, the most obnoxious part of 3 is the amount of wasted space in cutscenes that can be filled with dialogue, or even parts where scenes should be extended to allow for more dialogue and explanation from characters. Like, how many times did we watch Bayonetta sit there and stare into space as the people around her died? Even her own counterparts. Some simple dialogue or maybe even an extra shot or two showing her try to do something but something stopped her would help immensely. We should also get more dialogue to allow for character moments between, say, Bayonetta and Luca or Bayonetta and Viola. Bayonetta and Cheshire would be good too after Bayonetta Origins. Heck,
will
even
never call her
Bayonetta and
Bayonetta.
Sigurd or Jean and Sigurd. All of these additions could have given the ending some actual weight, but instead we have a hollow shell. So that's something that we can fix in a remastered version on Switch too. We should also get some dialogue explaining concepts we see on screen, like why the Arc Eves turned to crystal, or what the heck was going on with all the released Arc Eves towards the end of the game, where they're there but maybe not there, and the same with Jean, and how Bayonetta 1 and 2 got there in the end, or what that light Luca was emitting means for him and Cereza when they're getting dragged to hell. Like, come on guys, Platinum Games, explain your We shouldn't be having to make up for you. You do know that these things would be a million times cooler in your game if you gave a why and how to everything happening. This also feeds into another form of additional content we should get. A complete rework to some cutscene choreography. I already kind of gave an example of this on how Bayonetta should be shown making an effort in scenes to stop the havoc around her and have dialogue added showing that she cares, but beyond that in general,
She was
Platinum
just
Games needs
watching
to
all the
redo
time.
many scenes to make them more believable. A great example of this is when China Bayonetta gets grabbed by Pyrocumulus. No way she just stood there while that giant-ass hand popped out of the lava and slowly moved to grab her. Or, no way Japan Bayonetta got by an...
Because it doesn't make sense for someone who has the left eye. How do you just sit there and watch somebody die? Like, you can foresee these things. Unless we're talking about Little Bay, Little Cereza, and maybe she doesn't have the left eye.
enemy
That
that
could be
barely did
plausible.
any damage in gameplay and that we killed in 2 or 3 hits. Rework these cutscenes to make them believable, please. Currently they make no sense and it just makes players mad, as you can tell by the tone in my voice. Finally, the biggest form of additional content we should get in a Bayonetta 3 Switch 2 edition are extra chapters. Now, I have a couple suggestions for this. One is obviously to have playable chapters. Now, Platinum Games, if you're worried about these getting in the way of the game's pacing, then there's a simple and elegant solution. Have these chapters become available after we finish the main campaign. or just make
Oh
them
yeah, I remember.
optional bonus chapters to give us
Yeah.
more insight and context to different story beats. Like we don't have to select it on the screen, but we can and be told that we could watch and play them if we want additional context to something that's happening at that given point in the story.
Because
So if they do decide,
and that should have been the ending right there. If you're gonna do a multiverse, that should have been the ending right there.
to go with the post-game route, maybe they could do something like give us chapters where we play as the Bayonetta 1 and 2 variants and show us how they arrived to help Arc Cereza in the end.
Oh,
We could
that's
also have
true.
more chapters where we play as Jean and her explaining her plan for exploiting Singularity now that we know that she knew her future ahead of time thanks to Bayonetta Origins.
They're not gonna do that. They're gonna move on to 4.
Conversely, we could also get unlockable cutscene chapters that aren't playable but simply watchable. These could be unlocked either during the campaign or be optional to watch before we start the next chapter, or they can be unlocked after beating the game to give us more context. These could focus on things like Viola's mother Bayonetta and the things that whole world went through. They could focus on explaining Lucan's involvement in the story. They could focus on the Bayonetta 1 and 2 variants that we talked about that come in towards the end. Heck, these could focus on the lives of the different Cerezas that we meet throughout the different multiverses. God, you guys created a fictional world with so much depth and potential. Please, let's just put it to good use, and I promise it will elevate your game so much, Platinum Games. Just look at how well Bayonetta Origins was received by fans. That game had no shame telling a story and taking its time to do so. We clearly love
Haven't
the
played
world
that
and
game.
stories you guys have to tell,
Maybe
so
I should.
just tell them. But for now, I digress. Bayonetta 3 is not only, in my opinion, the Switch 1 game most deserving of a Switch 2 edition, but it's also one I believe needs it before the series moves on from here. Please, Platinum Games, don't be twiddling your thumbs after seeing the terrible reception to Bayonetta 3. Just fix it. You have a great avenue to do it with the concept of Switch 2 editions, so please, by all means, do it. Everyone
maybe
will
they
benefit
will.
from
This
that.
is why they're having
you
some kind of
and your
anniversary.
fans. But for everyone else watching, let's comment below more things we want to see in a Switch 2 edition.
Alright, subscribe to this man. But yeah, let me know what you think about this video down in the comments below. Let me know what other gaming videos you want me to react to. Like and subscribe if you want to become a view today. And I'll see you guys on live streams. Bye.